Hey guys, tonight we're climbing into Ethiopia's Simeon Mountains, where 11th century monks turned candle drippings into kingdoms. Picture jagged peaks clawing at a moonlit sky, air so thin your breath carries echoes of forgotten prayers. Let's be real, you wouldn't last 10 minutes hauling firewood at this altitude, though your chances improve if I mention the mead. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and current time below. I want to know who's braving midnight in Tokyo versus sipping dawn tea in Marrakesh. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You kneel on a woven reed mat, its rough fibers imprinted with 5 centuries of knee-shaped indentations. Moonlight slices through narrow monastery windows, silver streaks illuminating a chessboard carved from volcanic rock. But here's the twist. Every piece feels slightly sticky. Lift a pawn, and your fingertips sink into warm beeswax, hardened with myrrh resin. 13 generations of monks played this way, replacing shattered ivory with candle remnants during long rainy seasons. Modern historians confirm the Zagwe dynasty funded chess scholarship. Their royal archives mention boxed armies for holy contemplation. But the real kicker, those monks kept licking the pieces. Chronicles note wax pawns tasted of honeycomb during droughts. Some claim it helped predict rainfall patterns. Imagine strategizing your bishop's move while debating whether to swallow or checkmate. You reach for a knight shaped like a coiled serpent, its wax surface mottled with thumbprints. Each groove maps a different prior game, strategies preserved like tree rings. The monastery's goatskin manual warns 3 melted rooks signal impending locust swarms. Never mind chess theory, these guys used missing pieces as agricultural forecasts. Air thickens with the burned honey scent of aging beeswax. Your candlestick gutters molten wax pools around a rook's base, warping its movement range. Historians still argue whether monks considered this cheating or divine intervention. One parchment fragment insists losing players had to lick the entire board clean, an early form of motivational coaching. You maneuver your queen through monk's favorite opening, the scorpion's sting, pushing pawns in diagonal honeycomb patterns. Wax softens under your palm, time turns tactile. Every match here balanced on temperature. Ventilation slits in the chamber walls weren't for air. They regulated the board's pliability during prayer hours. Suddenly, a realization, those darker squares aren't stained wood. They're decades of accumulated incense ash pressed into the stone. Your bishop grinds to a halt mid-sacrifice, wax axle fused to charred frankincense. This changes everything. Games could last weeks, players returning after vespers to find reconfigured battle lines. A distant bell tolls, your candle's final flame drowns in its own wax. Darkness wraps the board. But here's your last sensory grenade. True masters played blindfolded, tracking positions by scent as pieces released spice-laden vapors. Checkmate smelled like cardamom, defeat reeked of burnt time. Your fingers hover over cooling wax, tonight's lesson clear. Strategy isn't carved in stone. It's molded by time, heat, and the things we willingly melt. You run your finger along hexagonal depressions in the weathered board, beeswax residue still clinging to its honeycomb grid. Moonlight slants through monastic cellar vents, catching the ghostly shimmer of propolis in the grooves. Here's your textbook trivia. Real Ethiopian hives used 6-sided cells long before mathematicians proved them efficient. But these monks didn't just copy nature, they weaponized geometry. Each pawn's base fits snug into the comb pattern, locking into place like armor segments. A 15th century inventory list surfaces in your research. 300 wax chess sets listed between incense strainers and mule tack. One footnote snags your attention. Pieces were softened in sunlight before games, making them pliable as fresh honeycomb. You imagine robed figures huddled over boards at noon, their strategies literally shaped by solar piety. Debate flares in academic circles. Did melting the wax represent humility? Or was it just easier on arthritic fingers? The real kicker: each bishop's mitre contains a single bee wing. You find the proof in a cracked ivory figurine, translucent membrane still stretched across its crevices. Devout players believed clipped wings anchored holy spirits to the game. Never mind that actual apiarists consider this sacrilege. Bees need those to fly. Your candle gutters as you examine a queen piece cross-section. Charred scroll fragments reveal the never-before-seen recipe. Fermented honey, graveyard soil, and charcoal from burned psalms. The resulting wax stays firm in summer heat, but dissolves in holy water. Historians still argue whether this made games temporary devotions or cheat-proof deterrents. You smirk at a marginal doodle. Some medieval monk drew his opponent as a donkey-eared bishop. The joke transcends centuries. Beneath sacred intent, human pettiness endures. By midnight, you're mapping constellations against the board's geometry. Orion's belt aligns with 3 central hexagons. The King's Path, described in lunar eclipse records. Trace the pattern west, and you'll hit the monastery's long-collapsed apiary. Coincidence? Ask 3 experts, get 5 theories. The final revelation comes when you breathe on a surviving night piece. Warmth makes its wax emit a faint hum, the same frequency as worker bees' rallying cry during swarm season. Across 800 years, the battlefield still calls its soldiers. Your thumb brushes the knight's humming flank until a crumbled pawn in your other hand steals focus. This unassuming wax blob holds darker secrets. Every pawn began as a novice monk's vow, molded with thumbprints, still bearing fasting calluses. You've read the 1398 liturgical text, comparing their march to Lenten processions. but no parchment prepares you for their weight. 16th century tax records confirm it. Ethiopian monasteries paid beekeepers in chess-piece molds. That's your mainstream fact, wedged between mold spores and candle drips. Yet, touch reveals the true oddity. Some pawns bear microscopic teeth marks. Turns out sleep-deprived novices chewed their pieces during all-night matches, a heresy later banned by the Council of Axum. You rotate a particularly gnawed pawn under lamplight. Its base shows concentric grooves, the pilgrim circles walked by rookies circling the monastery's hives. 7 circuits daily, whispering psalms as bees buzzed counterpoint, their blistered feet, rhythm seeped into the wax. Or so claims Abbot Yerd's controversial scroll. Debate still simmers about the dissolution ritual. Did losers truly melt pawns in holy water? Or was that pilgrim's parable for surrender? The Damascus Codex says yes, but its pages were found dipped in mead. You try it anyway. A sacrificial pawn hisses in your consecrated vial. Bubbles rise carrying whispers you'd swear sound like old Giez vowels. Player confession. The untouched pawn rule wasn't holy, just practical. Early pieces crumbled if handled more than thrice. Touch a pawn once to place it, twice to move, a thrice to capture. Then it dissolved like sugar in rain. You test it. The piece softens on your third grip. Shedding wax tears onto the board. Here's the morbid gag they don't teach dead novices. Pawns were baked into memorial bread, specifically the left pawns, since those represented worldly attachments. You find the recipe in a salter's margins: ground wax, barley flour, and myrrh. Historians still argue whether players actually ate the bitter loaves or just chucked them at rivals. Twilight seeps through stained glass as you line up pawns along their starting hexagons. Their shadows stretch into stick figures, some bowing, others mid-stride. It's strangely familiar until you realize they mimic the stickman doodles in the pricey book of games you skimmed last week. Turns out medieval meme culture peaked with strategic wax. The kicker: pawns weren't named pawns. Scrolls call them starvelings, references to novices who fasted too zealously before matches. One account describes a 40-day bread and honey diet that left players hallucinating bishops as actual hornets. You resist licking the pawn, but hey, no judgment if you're tempted. Your candle dies as you reach the board's far edge. Moonlight now bathes the first pawn's progress, 8 hexagons traversed, edges worn smooth by 8 centuries of devout fingertips. In the silence, you almost miss the faint click. The piece has reached its destination and split down the middle. Inside rests a curled parchment scrap. Unfurl it to find a single word in fading ink: mäts'haf, library. But the monastery's library burned in 1535. Unless your gaze slides to the pawn's hollow interior. Maybe the real texts were hidden inside the pieces, all along, tiny reliquaries swallowed by forgetful novices. You glance at the remaining pawns. 31 stomach-turning possibilities. A breeze snuffs your lamp. In the dark, the split pawn begins to hum, same pitch as the knight's battle cry. The monk's laughter seems to rattle the window shutters. 800 years gone, and they're still outsmarting everyone. The split pawn's hum merges with distant chanting. Or maybe that's just the monastery droughts harmonizing with beeswax acoustics. You pocket the mäts'haf scrap and reach for a bishop, only to flinch. Its surface burns hotter than August stones. Turns out these tapered pieces were never meant for idle touch. They're ritual matchsticks waiting for fire. Here's the spark. Ethiopian bishops didn't ignite the wax themselves. They angled pieces to catch midday sunbeams through chapel windows. Sun-baked diagonals became celestial fuse lines, but your candlelit copycat attempt fails. Modern glass lacks the original monastery's honeycomb glazing. A 12th century inventory lists 84 resin lenses shaped like hive cells. Ever seen a bishop sweat? Submerge one in incense, smoke, and watch. The wax softens into what looks like holy perspiration, thick droplets pooling at its base. Novices called this angel's tears and bottled it as cough syrup. Cut to you pretending not to consider licking the blob. For science, the mainstream truth arrives via charcoal rubbings. Diocesan records prove bishops doubled as purification tools, melted wax drippings, sealed sacred contracts. But the real kicker, melt patterns predicted harvest yields. A 1453 ledger shows chess-based agricultural forecasts outseeding astrologers' guesses, until someone misplaced the queen mid-drought. Your nose leads you to the fringe stuff. That charcoal tang, not just burnt wax. Bishops were packed with myrrh granules that fizzed when heated. Chroniclers wrote of games emitting perfumed thunder during tense endgames, which explains the scorch marks on your fingertips. Historians still argue whether the sizzling was liturgical theater or a beekeeping inside joke. Lean closer to the smoking bishop. Its base reveals embedded saffron threads, the same spice used to anoint Easter bread. Coincidence? The 1521 Council of Lalibela banned culinary enhancements in chess pieces. Someone kept spicing. You attempt a defensive formation until the left bishop lists sideways, its base melting into a golden puddle. Turns out, melt slightly in prayer's heat was code for total structural betrayal. A scraped-together manual mentions cooling, chambers beneath the board, stone drawers stocked with snow from Mount Abuna Yosef. Your ice pack substitute, a hastily fetched yogurt cup. Witness the great wax migration. Molten bishops ooze toward the board's edge like disgruntled clergy. Their golden trails mimic constellation paths in Ethiopic star charts. Suddenly, the game's purpose shifts, not checkmate, but celestial navigation. Rotate the board counterclockwise, and those wax rivulets align with the dog star's summer position. Or maybe you've inhaled too much myrrh smoke. The piece de resistance, a half-melted bishop, reveals its core, a rolled copper scroll etched with lunar phases. Unfurl it to find a shopping list. 13 pounds of beeswax, 2 jars of cloudberry jam, 3 sturdy ladders for hive repairs. Monks, just like us, except their office supplies predicted eclipses, your attempt at fire-free strategy. Place bishops in the fridge. They emerge brittle as communion wafers, and just as prone to crumbling when breathed on. A marginal note in the Kebra, Nagast, warns against chilling God's flame. Apparently frozen bishops curse the next harvest. You check tomorrow's weather app. 70% chance of guilt-ridden gardening. By dawn, your board resembles a candle maker's crime scene. The yogurt-cooled bishop now permanently slouches, a waxen bishop from a disco inferno nightmare. But tilt your head northeast, squint past the carnage, there it is. The melted paths trace Ursa Major's tail with uncomfortable accuracy. Turns out you've spent all night mapping stars with botched epoxy art. The kicker comes when you reheat the scroll. Heat the copper, and the lunar phases disappear, replaced by instructions for embedding moth chrysalises in ponds. Nature's metronomes, time to hatch during checkmate. Too bad yours dissolved into a sneeze-inducing spice cloud hours ago. The monk's laughter echoes in your sinuses, 9 parts mirth, 1 part powdered frankincense. Your eyelashes crusted with incense ash. You almost miss the charred corner peeking from goat hide wrappings. Unfold the brittle layers there. The wax king glows amber where fire met sacred resin, his crown half melted into a jagged halo. Touch the surface. It's unnervingly warm despite 7 centuries buried in a reliquary. Mainstream histories mention lalibellas, rock-hewn churches. But few note the chessboard tiles beneath St. George's altar. Archaeologists found scorched wax in their 1934 excavation. Melt patterns matching Ethiopic coronation rites. Kings were crowned mid-game, their checkmates sealing royal legitimacy. Lose strategically, and your reign ended faster than a rainstorm in Danakil. The quirky bit: that resin isn't frankincense. Spectral analysis revealed traces of cot, the stimulant leaf Ethiopians still chew. Imagine a coronation where the king's peace gives everyone a caffeine buzz. Court poets wrote of rulers twitching with divine inspiration during endgames. Your attempt to replicate this involves espresso grounds and a very jittery afternoon. Historians still argue whether the scorch marks were accidental or ritual branding. The king's left flank shows precise burn patterns, like someone held a magnifying glass to map veins in molten wax. Turns out they did. Manuscripts describe sun scribes using polished obsidian lenses to etch prayers into royalty. Your magnifying glass from last summer's beach reads, property of Dave Sandcastle, in equally holy somehow. Peel away a resin flake. Beneath lies a hair-thin gold wire coiled into Gia's script. It translates to Malcolm Akwami, "My king is honey." Poetic. Until you find 19 more layers repeating the phrase like apocalyptic fridge poetry, monastic vandalism, or sacred mantra. The wire's alloy offers clues. It's 23% aurum, 77% melted down communion cups. Recycled divinity hits different, breathe on the king's cracked bass. A dissonant hum rises G-sharp, if your tone-deaf ears remember choir practice. Musicologists identified these frequencies in Coptic lamentations, also in Ethiopian beehives during swarming season. Coincidence? The Abuna Yosef Monastery's apiary was built atop a 6th century chess crypt. Bees learned liturgical chants before humans had Spotify playlists. Your fatal mistake, balancing the king on a radiator for better acoustics. Heat makes his remaining crown drip into the coordinates of bad decisions. The manual warned against melting sovereignty. But since when do warnings stop anyone? Now your windowsill grows an amber icicle that reeks of sanctified cot. Airbnb host won't notice, probably. Scrape the cooled resin. It fractures into hexagonal prisms, each face reflecting your eye in triplicate. 3rd century astrologers used these shards for Trinity visions. Stare long enough, and 3 of you debate which takeout to order. Original monks saw visions of past kings playing future chess, which explains their confusion about motorized delivery scooters. The piece de resistance, a blackened cavity in the king's chest, cradles a petrified scarab beetle. Why? Eritrean burial practices involved scarabs as sole anchors, but this one's glued with honey wine sediment. Touch its wing casings, and static makes your arm hairs levitate. Science says dry air. Your adrenal gland screams desecration fees. Reburying the king feels wise. But first the test. Place him near your half-dead basil plant. By dawn, the leaves perk up suspiciously green. Coincidence or 700-year-old fertilizer? The Kebra-Nagast mentions regal wax reviving blighted crops, and your herb garden's sudden vigor screams ancient plant steroids. That's when the humming resumes deeper now, vibrating your molars. The king's remaining eye socket glows faintly. Remember those sun scribes? Turns out they encoded solar flares into wax density. Time-lapse photos reveal the resin darkening during today's geomagnetic storm. Your weather app didn't mention Armageddon. Monks probably used it to time laundry days. Final discovery. Tilt the king 45 degrees, and scorch marks resolve into Coptic numbers. Subtract the year of Menelik II's coronation. Carry the sacred cot residue. Voila. It's a recipe for sourdough starter using yeast from Nile Delta lilies. Historians swear it's coincidence. Bakers' forums call it the Messiah loaf. Your first attempt births a dough that levitates 2 inches, or maybe the countertops unlevel as sunset stains the resin blood orange reality blurs. Is that beetle leg twitching? Probably imagination, or the 5 espresso shots. You swear Ethiopic numerals shimmer on the wall, emergency hotline for melted monarchs. Nope, just headlights through resin smears on your glasses. The monk's final joke. Time's up, king to refrigerator. Prayers to pizza. Eternity to next weekend's laundry. Torchlight licks at wax knights, slumped across the board, their lances drooping like burnt candle wicks. You lean closer. One horse's head slides downward, molten strategy, pooling on moonlit wax squares. Monks played these games during solar eclipses, their only light stolen from Orion's belt. Mainstream texts confirm Ethiopian astrologers tracked lunar cycles using stone alignments at Deber Damo, but none mention chess pieces melting into prophetic shapes. That dripping night, its puddle forms a perfect scimitar curve by dawn. Coincidence? Try telling that to the 14th century illustration you once saw in Addis, a wax vizier's sword predicting monsoon paths. Historians still argue whether sudden downpours reset games or drowned clumsy pawns. The Great Flood of 1353, manuscript mentions, floated bishops clogging gutters. But let's blame medieval hyperbole. Here's the quirky kicker. Those nights aren't pure beeswax. Infrared scans showed traces of scarab beetle secretions in their bases, nature's non-stick coating. Your local entomologist huffed. It's basically medieval Teflon. Monks allegedly farmed beetles in prayer bell towers, double holy duty as pest control. Tonight, you'll test their waterproof claims with a hairdryer and saucer of holy water stolen from a Viennese hotel. Watch the Queen's crown. Every full moon, its wax thins to translucence, revealing a pressed jasmine petal at the core. Botanists dated it to post-Aksumite era. Same period Queen Judith burned churches, while allegedly mastering 4-move checkmates. Your attempt to Xerox the petal just jammed the machine. Ancient flora rejects modernity. The real mystery: how they kept pieces playable. Lunar tides affected wax viscosity. Games required tilt boards during wet seasons. You've propped yours on yoga blocks, which works until the cat sees a mice-shaped pawn. One manuscript describes a novice losing his robe, betting on monsoon-delayed castling. The abbot's punishment: hand-carving termite-resistant pawns with his teeth. Smell that. Vanilla undertones beneath the beeswax. Gas chromatography found fermented olives in Ethiopian pieces. Post-game snacks melted into rooks. Monks believed olive pits housed defeated kings' souls. Your reproduction uses martini onions because history deserves a garnish. Notice the board's warped edges. Each monsoon swell left ripple patterns in the wax, like tree rings for rainfall. Climatologists cross-referenced these with Nile flood records in 2017, matched perfectly, except for the drought year grooves that align with a scribe's note. Brother Tesfaye spilled mead during spring tides. Your fatal error: playing near an open window. on humidity makes the remaining night list sideways, a deranged crab ambushing your bishop. Original sets included monsoon rules, letting players freeze pieces with chilled breath, your freezers full of pizza rolls. Strategic priorities shift. That bishop's mitre. It unscrews. Inside rests a coiled parchment with 16 chess problems and a grocery list. Carbon-dated ink mentions 2 jars of honey, 1 sack of millet, frankincense for the deluxe set. Monastic life, always multitasking. Rest your palm on the board. Residual warmth pulses like a heartbeat, or maybe that's your third coffee. Electromyography studies showed monks developed unique hand tremors from decades of night games. Their modern descendants dominate Ethiopian speed chess leagues and probably barista competitions. The piece de resistance. Tilt the board under UV light. Faint handprints surface between squares, 19 individuals across 3 centuries. Palmistry bots identify a recurring strategist's line curving toward the pinky. Or maybe they all had arthritis from carving hives. As moonlight fades, the queen's petal darkens to burnt umber. 3rd century poets called this the hour of liquid gambits, when wax flowed fastest and alliances melted. You attempt a classic Ethiopian fork with 2 pawns, but they've merged into a blob resembling a confused sheep. Rebuild the knight with a dental pick and determination. Its new posture suggests aggressive jazz hands, not ideal for cavalry charges. Original mold guidelines advised kneading under Libra's ascent. Your horoscope today warned of structural instability in creative projects. Thanks, astrology app. Dawn leaks through shutters. The board solidifies into permanence, mostly. 1 rook's foundation holds a trapped air bubble, the 14th century equivalent of a factory defect. Monks sold these breathing pieces to rich patrons as spiritual humidifiers. Yours emits a faint wheeze when the AC kicks on ghostly, or HVAC-ly. Final discovery. The board's underside bears incense burn marks in precise chess notation. Each scorch corresponds to a historical match's final move. Your attempt to replicate it with a scented candle just set off the smoke detector. The monk's final lesson in hubris. Cooling wax stiffens into tomorrow's battlefield. Somewhere, a 700-year-old beetle shell cracks under pressure. Same as your resolve to clean up before checkout. Rainwater trickles down monastery walls, pooling around chessboard indentations in clay floors. You press a thumb into the damp depression. Something flickers, negative space pawns shimmering like mirages on rain-darkened stone. These ghost boards appeared after monsoon matches, lingering until the next downpour rewrote history. Mainstream records confirm 10th century monks brewed mead from cliffside hives, but only fringe diaries mention dissolving chess strategies in it. Imagine tipping a half-finished game into fermented honey wine hubris, and poor bishop placement fizzing into oblivion. Historians still argue whether this purified minds or just got everyone pleasantly sloshed. Your borrowed prayer mat holds its own secrets. Blacklight reveals faint pond-shaped stains, centuries of sweaty palms, and spilled altar wine. The pattern matches a 1321 inventory list. One linen board, slightly haunted. Monks apparently bleached these marks annually with lemon ash and shame. Here's the odd part. Siphon a liter of rainwater through the mat, and it tastes faintly of mint. Chromatography identified myrrh particles in Ethiopian monsoon clouds, but your tap water version just blends chlorine and regret. Watch the corner square. At 3:17 a.m. peak Munko clock, the woven fibers contract into miniature valleys. Climate historians note this coincides with medieval prayer schedules, or maybe the linens reacting to your questionable life choices. Those ghost pawns, they migrate. Time-lapse footage shows them inching toward an unseen king throughout the night. Your attempt to trap one under a whiskey glass only captured dust motes and embarrassment. Smell that. Petrichor and fermented wax, the signature scent of 7th century strategic surrenders. One manuscript claims losing players inhaled this aroma before fasting, though scholars suspect they just really liked earthy candles. The real kicker: shine a laser pointer across the mat. Certain threads glow mint green, mapping a 1536 match between Abbot Johannes and his nemesis, a particularly smug goat. Bet records show the goat won 43 honeycakes before being disqualified for eating the queen. Notice the central stain's irregular edges. It mirrors Lake Tana's shoreline during the Great Drought of 1412. Climatologists found identical shapes in sediment cores, but your attempt to float a wax bishop there sank immediately. Your critical error: sneezing during the witching hour. Breath disperses a phantom rook's outline. Now it resembles a deflated soccer ball. Original monks used bellows to redirect drafts. Sadly, your hair dryers in pond jail after the Bishop Flambe incident. That frayed corner. Unravel one thread, and it leads to a 1927 repair job. Stitches forming Coptic letters reading "defeated again. Praise be." Archivists verified a monk's 800-year sulking streak. Relatable. Rest your forehead against the damp stone. Coolness seeps into your skull, or is that residual medieval angst? Paleontologists found similar indentations in Lalibella's monasteries, though those might just been bored stonemasons. The grand revelation. King David's harp near the mat. Hidden wool fibers vibrate at 432 Hz, same frequency as vintage Ethiopian prayer bells. Your off-key rendition summons nothing but a neighbor's irate knocking. Spiritual sensitivity varies. As dawn approaches, phantom pieces fade into the weave. 16th century poets called this the whisper of dry strategies. When absorbed games haunted tomorrow's players, you attempt one last move with a toothpick proxy, but the mat just absorbs it like a carbs at brunch. Slide a parchment under the linen. Morning dew transfers a blurred Sicilian defense, played backward. Translators suggest it's either genius or a monk's drunken doodle, depending on how charitable you're feeling after 2 hours. Sleep. Final twist. The mat's underside reeks of rosemary. Gas masks weren't invented, yet monks just called this Thursday. Your imitation spray bottle blend attracts fruit flies, tiny judges of historical accuracy. The last ghost pawn dissolves as sunlight hits the threshold. Somewhere, 8th century mead bubbles through long-collapsed pipes, same as your dignity circling the motel drain. A wax-smeared parchment fragment clings to your shoe, rescued from the monastery's compost heap. Blow away the roasted barley husks, and it reveals a grid of hexagons, chess notation bleeding into musical staves. This is Abbot Johann's lost riddle page recording games played during Lenten fasts. Mainstream histories confirm Ethiopian monks abstained from meat and communal singing for 55 days. Yet this scrap says they hummed through closed lips, vibrations shaping bishops' paths on honeycomb boards. You attempt the first move, advancing a pawn from c2 to c3. The manuscript hisses faint mint leaf static. Turns out you're supposed to sing the coordinates. Your off-key CE makes the diagram's candle wax smear wiggle like a chastised worm. Historians still argue whether these musical intervals aided meditation or just covered growling stomachs. The Codex Ambrosianus mentions fasting monks hallucinating edible queens, though that might have been the ergot-tainted rye talking. Here's the kicker: lick the parchment. Centuries later, it tastes of bitter herbs and choir loft dust. Spectroscopy detected traces of dried Tej mead in the ink, probably spilled during a particularly enthusiastic checkmate. Squint at the honeycomb's edge. Microscopic Aramaic script spells. 3 sharps summon the night. A directive matching medieval Ethiopian psalters. Your attempt at the die's Eri scale summons only a disgruntled moth. Turns out middle C was invented after parchment mildew. Notice the smudged bishop icon. It's positioned where Lent's fasting prayers peaked the hunger moon hour. Climate data shows 1322's Lent coincided with a solar eclipse, convenient for blaming missed moves on divine intervention. That honeycomb grid isn't decorative. Each hexagon equals 1 note in the Zema chant tradition, verified by a 1934 Oxford dissertation everyone forgot. Your smartphone's metronome app syncs with the diagram's pulse until low battery anxiety disrupts the rhythm. The parchment warps when you hum Gregorian chants, proving Western tonemes enrage Ethiopian beeswax. Reverse engineering the warp patterns suggests Abbot Johann's composed a rudimentary blues scale 4 centuries before the Mississippi Delta claimed it. Candlelight reveals hidden pawn trails arcing between glyphs like a drunk honeybee. Each curve matches the nasal resonance frequency of Giez vowels. Your nasal Hail Selassie. Hum snaps a thread in the parchment. Close enough. Smell that. Fermented parchment and existential dread, the classic aroma of unsolvable monastic homework. One marginal note warns, beware the gambit of 7 sighs, probably metaphor. Your experimental Sispree just dehumidifies the room. The real mischief starts at verse 9. Lyrics demand swapping pieces mid-hymn, a logistical nightmare when handling sticky wax figures. Manuscript smudges imply countless queens got squashed during high C crescendos. A tragedy for chess and tenors alike. That coffee stain, carbon dated to a 1418 Norwegian trade delegation, their clumsiness immortalized beside Johann's rage-scribbled fikir mal. Think differently. Modern Ethiopians still use the phrase when checkers players get cocky. Blow across the parchment's edge. It emits a warped F-sharp, same pitch as Lalibella's cave of crosses, wind holes. Your lung capacity falters, much like Abbot Johann's patience with soprano novices. Ultraviolet light exposes disco-era Bic pen marks. Some scholars failed 1973 attempt to disco-wife. The riddle, their notes admit, disco and Lenten asceticism, perhaps incompatible vibes. Press the parchment to a windowsill. Morning light projects a ghostly night onto your forearm, its move path tracing the Lord's Prayer in Giez. Your shadow shifts. Now it resembles a llama. Interpretation varies. Final clue, microwave the fragment for 4 seconds. Heat reactivates camel hair brush strokes, rearranging into a 9th century Sudoku grid. Monks probably did this to mess with future grad students. And it's working. As dawn breaks, the parchment seals itself with rediscovered beeswax, a self-preservation trick from the Book of Enoch playbook. Your souvenir now resembles a kindergarten art project, profoundness optional. The last musical note evaporates with a pop, leaving your ears ringing, and dignity questioning every life choice since archaeology grad school. Somewhere, Abbot Johann's chuckles into his Mida, or maybe that's just acid reflux. Your fingertips brush ridges in the pawn's underbelly, grooves too precise for wear. Darkness heightens each bump's urgency, like braille carved by fireflies. Monastic sources confirm 14th century scribes translated psalms into tactile codes during mandatory silent periods. But this feels like someone fingered the Song of Solomon during chess. The bishop's mitre hides a spiral channel, rotated counterclockwise, and wax grinds against wax, secret teeth meshing. Some claim it's just votive candle residue, until you hit resistance at 7 turns. A panel pops open reeking of myrrh and teenage rebellion. Inside rests a coiled parchment strip. Unfurl it by moonlight, and Giez consonants swim, visible only to pupils fully dilated by night. Translators identify it as Psalm 23. If Psalm 23 compared God to a chess queen, who leadeth me beside still waters, except on Tuesdays, Historians still debate whether these compartments stored illicit honey or actual divine messages. The National Museum in Addis Ababa displays a rook with amen grooves detectable only after 3 hours of continuous thumbing. Your own rook just gives you a friction burn. Tilt the knight toward candle heat. Melt lines form temporary letters along its withers, ephemeral as mist. A 1920s monk's diary describes reading entire parables this way, rewarming pieces, until his table resembled a fondue disaster. Losing players had it worse. Rules forced them to imprint confessions into molten pawns using reed styluses. One recently decoded pawn reads, "I coveted Brother Tesfaye's endgame and his lentil stew. The queen's crown oozes under pressure, literally, squeezed too hard, and her wax reservoirs squirt scented oils. Lavender for safe passage, fermented gesho for impending doom. Your pillowcase may never recover from that checkmate mishap." Scholars found 62 psalms hidden in a single ivory bishop's base, a feat requiring microscope-wielding scribes. Your dollar store magnifying glass reveals eyelash debris and poor life choices. True decryption demands total sensory deprivation. Monks trained in pitch-black crypts, reading grooves through linen cloth. You attempted wearing socks on your hands, which helps exactly as much as expected. Some grooves aren't grooves at all. UV scans show pawns contain beeswax from hives struck by lightning, carbonized layers spelling out hexes. The Vatican's chess set allegedly causes static shocks, but they blame faulty wiring. Your pinky traces a recursion loop, a psalm that encodes instructions for decoding itself. It's like those helpful assembly manuals where step 1 is become an engineer. Monks probably giggled while designing these eternal inside jokes set in wax. The king's hidden chamber inexplicably contains saffron. Either someone stored spices in their chessmen, or this is the world's pettiest excommunication relic. Blow on the rook's arrow slits. Each hole whistles a different monastic mode. Combine them, and you get Mary Had a Little Lamb, suggesting either divine humor or chronic anachronism. Pressure-sensitive psalms fade if read aloud, their wisdom ratio inverse to modern self-help audiobooks. Whisper a groove's verse, and the wax smooths, taking your dignity with it. Dawn leaks through blinds. Last night's decoded fragments already soften, reabsorbing secrets like cautious spies. Only the queen's gesho stench lingers, a pungent reminder that history hates neat endings. The gesho's bitter tang still claws your throat 16 hours later. Your boot heel crunches something in the monastery ruins, not pottery wax. Sun-bleached honeycomb patterns cling to rock, last gasps of a chessboard scorched by forgetting. 16th century invasions weren't kind to apiaries. Ahmed ibn Ibrahim al-Ghazi's campaigns torched hives for candle making, strategic elimination of light sources and culture. Monks buried chess sets under prayer rugs, but termites mistook bishops for fancy combs. You kick a suspicious lump. It's not dung, it's a pawn fused with goat hair. Salvaged sets became hybrid toys. Children played siege, with pieces repurposed as doll furniture. One chronicle mentions a wax rook substituting for a missing placenta during childbirth. Historians still argue whether that was devotion or sheer desperation. Dig deeper. Your trowel hits resistance, a stone coffer lined with beeswax seals. The lock, a tiny chess problem. Black mates in 3, using only pawns and regret. Solve it, and the lid whispers open on hinges greased with donkey milk. Inside, the fabled anti-theft board. Monks coated it in clovash paste to repel invaders. Less a spell, more medieval pepper spray. Touch the king and your fingers tingle for days. The Vatican's copy triggered a 1704 exorcism. Records blame demonic pawns rather than poor skin conductivity. Rainwater warps the wood beneath you. Each droplet etches ghostly pawn shapes in the silt nature, replaying lost games. Local lore claims heavy storms resurrect buried wax pieces. But you're just sitting in a puddle. That smell again, burnt sugar and panic. Follow it uphill. Burnt cedar beams mark the last apiary chess workshop. Fireplace graffiti shows monks playing with flaming pieces or surrendering to arsonists. Carbon dating places the soot during the Great Wax Famine of 1622, when candle shortages forced nobles to use turnips as temporary bishops. A splintered board protrudes from the mud. Wipe it clean, see the protection spells. Hexagonal patterns double as bee migration maps. A queen's crown hides prayer knots in Amharic. Bind the raider's bowstrings with our wax, O Lord. Translation. Passive aggression as spiritual warfare. Parchment fragments survive in resin-sealed pawns. One lists 7 approved scents for distraction during sieges, fermented honey for interrogations. Your attempt to replicate it attracts wasps instead of angels. Night falls. Moonlight activates luminescent fungus in the board's cracks. Faint game diagrams, pulse green, a spectral rematch lasting centuries. Scholars detected similar bioluminescence in 3 Ethiopian psalters, though none admit they tested it by licking the pages. Dew softens the wax under your palm. Shapes shift. A bishop becomes a fleck of honeycomb. A pawn reverts to unformed blob. Conservationists warn that handling erases final memories. But isn't that how all stories end? At dawn, you pack the least melted pieces. Their grooves fit your fingerprints now, an unintended baptism. The original craftsman would have called it sacrilege, or maybe just Tuesday. Your rental car's trunk slams shut. Somewhere beneath hiking gear and poor decisions, a sun-warped board whispers Lubin's gambit through rusted hinges. Tomorrow, you'll pretend not to hear it. The rental car's whining AC can't mask that scent, burnt caramel and ozone. Your fingernails still groove from clutching the warped board. The road spits you into Harar's spice market, where cobblestones shimmer with discarded saffron strands and crushed cardamom pods. A vendor waves smoke toward you, frankincense coils swirling into chestnuts. Her stalls plastered with UNESCO plaques and peeling stickers of Haile Selassie riding a lion. Check the third drawer, she insists, knuckles tattooed with bishop silhouettes. Inside, wax shards humming like fridge motors, your trunk's chessboard answers. The pieces levitate, then freeze midair. A pawn's shadow points east. 2013 carbon tests proved Harar's incense roots reached Zanzibar by the 12th century, traders navigating by star charts sewn into camel saddles. Less known, their maps doubled as edible scorecards for roadside chess matches. The shopkeeper shrugs. They only buzz near fools chasing lost games. One fragment floats into your coffee, dissolving into hieroglyphs that itch behind your eyes. Experts decoded similar symbols in a 1586 Byzantine text, alongside a recipe for exploding bishop. Candlesticks. You pocket a shard. Mistake. Your teeth vibrate molars, tapping out the gin rummy quadrant opening. Local lore claims heavy drinkers once bet molar fillings during monsoon season matches. A 1928 dental ledger lists 17 enamel queens pawned for barley wine. The final piece clicks into your board, a smudged rook humming Dashan scales. Air thickens. Stall tarps billow into faceless opponents. Historians still argue whether the time suspension myth refers to relativistic physics or monks cheating jet lag with opium-laced honey. Sudden silence. The shards align as a ticking sound emerges, 3 clicks per heartbeat. Vendors cover their ears. Your wristwatch spins backward, then melts into a puddle of chrome and regret. A 1904 British expedition reported similar phenomena, blaming temporal bees rather than poor maintenance of their hourglasses. The shopkeeper slaps your hand. Idiot, now you've wound the game. She points to the board, its cracks glowing like reactor rods. A king's crown sprouts hyena teeth. A pawn swallows its own tail. The ticking accelerates. You remember the Vatican exorcism manuscript, how it described possessed boards singing Gregorian chants in reverse. This is worse. The tune's an Ethiopian pop hit from 2007, and you can't unhear it. Wax oozes upward, forming a flickering monk. His lips move. No sound, but the ticking. Translation apps crash. A butcher whispers that melted chessmen once stored plague cures, their grooves trapping antibodies from medieval epidemiologists. You're pretty sure he's mixing chess with chicken soup recipes. The monk gestures to the board. Make your move, but the pieces keep shape-shifting. A knight becomes your childhood pet gecko. The queen morphs into a disapproving ant. Your coffee's now cold tar. The ticking hits 60 decibels, glass vials shattering into powdered amber. Ground trembles. Tourists flee. The shopkeeper laughs. Good, now we play real games. She slams down a hexagonal board smeared in goat butter. its pieces, wasp nests and rusted nails, rules, none you'd recognize. A pawn eats your shoelace, dusk brings clarity or heat stroke. The ticking fades into cricket song, your shards reduced to grease on a chess pamphlet. Protection spell number 62 suggests reciting psalms while juggling king pieces. You attempt it badly. A passing cop finds you for unlicensed thaumaturgy. Moonrise erases the board's illusions. What's left? A pawn humming Candlemas dirges, and an ache where your wisdom teeth once were. The shopkeeper nods. Pay attention. It starts when you stop listening. Your hotel bed vibrates. The AC coughs wax dust. A spectral rook perches on the minibar, demanding cashews as tribute. You comply. Its silhouette sharpens into something resembling advice. True resurrection requires both smoke and someone left choking on it. Dawn finds you at the city gates. A beekeeper's truck idles loaded with hives and bad decisions. The driver nods to your trunk. That ticking's louder. You pretend not to notice his gloves, stitched with the same bishop tattoos. The engine roars. Behind you, Harar's markets dissolve into heat haze. Ahead, mountain passes where monks allegedly played chess with lightning. The pawn keeps humming, slower now. Like a countdown, like a lullaby, like neither. You could ditch the board here, bury it in some unmarked gorge. Instead, you pop another painkiller and crank the radio. A talk show debates Ethiopia's grandmaster boom, 37 champions in the past decade. Coincidence? The host's mic crackles, in perfect sync with the ticking, brakes screech. The beekeeper points to a roadside shrine, its alcove crammed with melted candles and ivory dice. They say time bends here. Make a wish. You toss in a wax shard. Sparks form a chess diagram above the flames, one move from checkmate. It's beautiful. It's suicidal. It's probably just a gas leak. You hold your breath and step closer. Smoke stings your nostrils, part burning myrrh, part overheated printer toner. The shrine's spark diagram sears itself behind your eyelids, a phantom chess problem, flickering with every blink. 2 truck speed later, you're squinting at a monastery gate made entirely of empty perfume vials. A novice greets you by sniffing your collar. Nilotic jasmine and petrol, modern pilgrim soup. His blindfold stains the air with indigo dye. Inside the courtyard, 14 monks sit before hexagonal boards, inhaling deeply. No pieces visible, just rising coils of amber steam. The abbot taps your shoulder, his beard braided with queen-shaped resin beads. We've upgraded. He points to a clay kiln billowing scented smoke. Each aroma corresponds to a piece, narrowly for knights, burnt rubber for rooks. You cough. Smells like a mechanic's divorce. He's not amused. Historical records confirm Ethiopian monks used incense games to teach astronomy. As early as 1615, their boards mirroring constellation patterns. The quirky twist: losers had to compose apology poems in bee pheromone code, a skill now lost to allergy medication. Breathe here, the abbot orders, shoving your face into a steaming trench. Vetiver oil floods your sinuses. Shadows morph into ponds made of clove smoke. A monk across the table, blinded by silk, soaked in fermented honey, moves her bishop. Via 3 rhythmic sneezes, your eyes water. What's the win condition? When checkmate hits, a monk collapses, twitching as frankincense and wood smoke explode from the kiln. Others cheer, then gag. The abbot nods. Rebellion sent means someone overturned a king, using only pawns. Historians still argue whether these aromas trigger chemical euphoria or just cover up illegal cheese smuggling from the 1800s. You're handed a blindfold dipped in strategic humility musk. First whiff, burnt hair and overripe mango. Ghostly pieces shimmer through the stench. Your night's cinnamon cologne trail fades mid-L-shaped move. A raspberry-scented pawn whispers gossip about your hotel's terrible Wi-Fi password. Focus, hisses the novice, now sniffing your earlobes for vibes. The abbot slams a gong made from a 1950s Geiger counter. Checkmate aromas now include wet dog fur and existential dread. You sacrifice a queen reeking of tax documents, triggering lavender plumes said to soothe 15th century battlefield trauma. A monk lights prayer sticks shaped like pawns. Final move. You inhale sharply, tasting metal and betrayal. Your opponent's king dissolves into a pollen cloud, humming Radiohead's Creep. The kiln erupts with peppermint and gunpowder. Monks scatter as the abbot chuckles. Ah, the rebellion of 1822 always sneaks into late games. Your blindfold catches fire. The novices beat it out with damp chess manuals. Through watering eyes, you spot a wall carving. Monks trading wax queens for sacks of salt during Mussolini's invasion. One footnote claims the resin's defensive stench repelled Italian tanks. You doubt formaldehyde ever stopped artillery. But hey, stranger things happened during colonial garage sales. Dusk filters through vial glass windows. The abbot presses a lump of emergency frankincense into your palm. Its label warns not for yogurt toppings. Next time, bring better deodorant, he says. Your anxiety sweat blurs the rook aromas. Outside, the air feels thinner. Your rental car's upholstery exudes suspiciously queen-shaped sweat stains. That phantom chessboard still flickers behind your eyelids, its smoky pawns now nibbling on your optic nerves. You consider lighting the emergency frankincense, until noticing its texture matches the shrine's melted wax shard. Headlights slice the mountain road. The radio reports a surge in nasal hallucinations across East Africa. Coincidence? The abbot's parting gift starts vibrating, sounding exactly like your third-grade teacher's disappointed sigh. You toss it out the window and immediately crave mangoes. Somewhere behind you, monks are laughing. Somewhere ahead, a petrol station's neon sign flickers in checkmate patterns. Your eyes won't stop watering. The glove box, full of pawn-scented tissues. The future, smells like peppermint and poor decisions. Your phone buzzes with a monastery review request. How would you rate your olfactory chess experience? 1 star, 5 stars, 10 stars, burning with the holy rage of 1,000 scented queens. You type, bring your own blindfold. The engine sputters, then purrs in D minor. A smoke knight materializes in your rearview mirror, its visor caked in 70-year-old combat honey. You hit the accelerator. The glove box clicks open. A resin bishop rolls out, trailing apology poem pheromones that make your sinuses compose sonnets. Dawn finds you parked at a cliffside. Below, fog forms hexagons over patchwork farms. The abbot's frankincense now coats your dashboard like edible armor. You snap it in half. The pieces scream in stereo. Then release a scent even Google can't identify. Part victory, part vertigo, part industrial floor cleaner. Your thumb hovers over the lighter. The glove box won't stop weeping resin. You squeeze past checkpoint guards doodling pawns on their clipboard margins. Each stampede your passport smells, increasingly like apologetic bergamot. Addis Abeba's diplomatic quarter looms, its buildings frosted with retirement age barbed wire and gift shop gravitas. A déchet licks your elbow. Still sweating Istanbul airport's caraway shampoo. Classic tell. He ushers you into a vault where 15 wax chess sets droop like exhausted dolly clocks. Ambassador's choice. He grins, plucking a rook that stretches like taffy. Coldplay's Viva La Vida thumps through hidden speakers. You resist pointing out the irony. The mainstream historical nugget. Ethiopia gifted these malleable sets during the 1963 Organization of African Unity Summit, a peace offering that allegedly paused 3 border disputes. The quirky bit. One board hummed "Stand By Me" whenever bishops neared checkmate, until someone spilled honey whiskey on its circuits. Your fingertips sink into a queen's torso, still warm from some dignitary's rage. They soften during deadlocks, the attaché explains. Brittle queens mean walkouts. Limp rooks signal progress. A nearby set reeks of G7 summit aftershave and censored memos. Historians still argue whether these were conflict resolution tools or just tax loopholes for honey exports. You don't care. The night in your palm now resembles Nixon's resignation speech. Try the crisis simulator, urges a junior diplomat, her hijab pinned with a pawn-shaped crisis. You're shoved into a negotiating chamber where the table's a giant hexagon oozing cinnamon. Zimbabwean trade envoys glare as you prod a bishop that smells like student loan paperwork. Cheating hisses someone's translator earpiece. The Zambian delegate melts his king into a door handle. Ecuador's team retaliates by folding their queen into origami anthrax. Silence. Then everyone sniffs the air. Your underarms are broadcasting panic pheromones shaped like tiny white flags. The attaché sighs. Amateur hour. He hurls a pawn into a fondue fountain, triggering emergency protocols. Plates of injera descend from ceiling tracks. Eritrean folk metal blares. A rook levitates briefly before plopping into someone's third espresso. You pocket a puddle that used to be Denmark's bishop. Later, vacuum sealed in a taxi, you press it to your forehead. Visions erupt. Swiss bankers playing wax chess with Yemeni rebels. Checkmate aromas masking chemical weapons inspections. The driver eyes you via a rearview mirror bent into a perfect knight's curve. Diplomacy, he mutters. Just toddlers smashing Play-Doh between gunpowder naps. At the hotel, minibar whiskey can't erase the queen-shaped welt on your palm. CNN murmurs, Ethiopian envoys just brokered a ceasefire using honeycomb tension metrics. The studio guest, a former UN negotiator, whose mustache mimics a melted rook. Sleep comes in hexagons. Dawn finds you at the airport. Security confiscates 5 grams of congealed strategizing from your sock. The X-ray tech giggles. Brazilian trade delegation. Boarding pass vibrates. Seat 13B. Beside a child sculpting NATO insignias from duty-free Beeswax. You accept the complimentary wine. The kid's bishop kicks your pawn's ass in 6 moves. The airport's fluorescent buzz fades as a tuk-tuk deposits you at a concrete hut smelling of burned caramel. A nun slaps a clay mold into your palm, still flecked with 13th century bee wings. Lalibella's lost workshop, she says, though GPS insists you're 3 miles from Starbucks. Your thumb traces grooves worn by dead monks. The recipe: beeswax harvested during total eclipses, rainwater collected in hymn-inscribed barrels, and something called incense regret. You stir the vat, its contents shimmer like molten topaz. Mainstream fact: Lalibella's rock-hewn churches used similar wax mixes for sealing sacred scrolls. Quirk alert: rumor says impatient monks once lubed these molds with mead-drenched dreadlocks. Your host demonstrates dipping a lock in honey before ramming it into the mold. Authenticity, she deadpans. The first pour scalds your cuticles. Memories flood in. A bishop's funeral pyre, a pawn shop in Kerala, trading wax queens for paprika. Your 3rd grade piano teacher morphing into a rook. The nun smirks. Told you we skipped the consent forms. Cooling matters. Too fast, pawns crack under pressure. Too slow, they droop like disgraced politicians. You balance the mold on a radiator stolen from Prague's 1968 uprising. Historians still argue whether these were chess tools or just fancy Eucharist wafers for heretics. Nightfall. The nun returns with a laser thermometer and 2 Thunderbird wines. Sister Magdalene's cheat code. She winks, chilling your pawns with ice packs smuggled from a Bolivian lithium mine. Spectral hands guide your fingers. Each press echoes strategies from emperors who died mid-checkmate. By dawn, your pawns glisten like ossified thunder. The toughest part: letting go. They'll fight better without you, the nun insists, prying a queen from your grip. Its base faintly pulses, an ancient heartbeat trapped in golden resin. You pocket a defective bishop that melted into something suggestive. Outside, the tuk-tuk driver nods at your clenched fist. Got the fever, huh? He's carved his dashboard into a passable chessboard using gum wrappers and existential dread. The airport scanner catches your wax stash. A guard prods the bishop with his tie clip. Medieval dildo, you shrug. Diplomatic immunity. He ziplocks it labeled cultural amnesia and waves you through. Gate B17 smells of espresso and strategic surrender. A toddler builds wax castles with UN sanction seals. You trade her a smuggled honey packet for a pawn. It dissolves instantly, your palm stinging with the ghost of a 14th century gambit gone wrong, boiling turbulence over the Red Sea. Your teeth ache from clenching. The wax's atomic structure remembers camelback battles and betrothals dissolved over ill-timed castling. Passengers sneeze as latent incense erupts from your carry-on. Somewhere over Chad, sleep claims you. Dreams whisper of a monk who checkmated God using poisoned pawns, his reward. Beeswax purgatory. You wake as the PA system barks about oxygen masks and emotional baggage, deplaning your shoes squelch. The bishop's final meltdown leaves a Rorschach blot on your sock. Customs officers swipe it for bioweapon testing. You don't argue. The nun texted a warning. Next time, use gloves and condoms. Home's fridge hums a familiar dirge. You arrange surviving pieces on a takeout pizza box. Their silhouettes cast shadows resembling the Lalibela churches. The queen topples, releasing a scent somewhere between armistice and student debt forgiveness. Rain taps Morse code on the window. Did monks weep when their wax outlived empires? You'll never know. Your pawns now guard microwave dinners instead of kingdoms. The bishop's twin surfaces in an Instagram ad for artisanal antidepressants. Midnight finds you needing supermarket wax with a stolen hotel Bible. Neon light bleeds through thrift store curtains, cheap bourbon substituting for eclipse rainwater. The first mold cracks with a sound like collapsing alliances. Somewhere a nun laughs. The bourbon's burn fades as your eyelids droop, neon glare morphing into starlight through monastic rafters. Your fingers sink into dream wax, warm as fresh bread dough, sour as a widow's wept wine. Monks materialize around a board carved from comet debris. Their pieces glow, kings crowned in firefly abdomens, knights sculpted from scarab wings. Moves crackle like parchment, catching flame. You try to speak, your tongue swells with molten resin. One monk glances up. His eyes hold supernovas. The board between you warps, its hexagons breathing like living cells. A pawn advances, triggering constellations to rearrange. Ursa Major becomes the first gambit. Orion's belt tightens into checkmate's noose. The pieces argue in high-pitched clicks. Your wax bishop shatters mid-capture. Its remains whisper names of dead popes. Historians still argue whether these games mapped heresies or just migraine hallucinations. The monk shrugs, reshaping your queen from earwax and lunar static. A rook topples. Its collapse sounds exactly for 25 cents between your third-grade couch cushions. You blink, suddenly back in your apartment. Dawn licks the windowsill. Your pizza box board sweats under stale sunlight. The wax king lists left, crown fused to a pepperoni shingle, yet stands. Its surface frosts over with what might be royal tears or fridge condensation. You recall a 12th century nun's diary claiming wax chessmen predicted plagues by melting eastward. Your thumb finds a groove on the king's base, carved letters in Giez script. They translate to kissed by ibex, which either commemorates a battle or a really weird honeymoon. The nun's laughter echoes through a half-eaten calzone. Rain taps the window, rhythm matching last night's monastery dream. You check your palms. Faint hexagons pulse, same pattern as the hive cells in Lalibella's hidden apiaries. Mainstream fact: those monks pioneered wax seals for royal decrees. Their recipe included crushed lapis lazuli. The bishop's remains congeal in your sink. As dishwater consumes it, you glimpse a tiny soldier waving from the drain. His sword's a toothpick, his shield a kombucha label. He bellows something about retreating empires before disappearing. Hunger strikes. Microwave noodles shudder as you open the fridge. The chessboard's shadow stretches across leftovers, its outline merging with your condiment shelf. Sriracha becomes a wounded knight. Soy packets form doomed infantry. By noon, the king's slumped into something Rorschachien. You squint. Is that a map of Addis Ababa or your ex's laugh lines? A text buzzes. The nun sends a winking nun emoji captioned, Google Ethiopian checkmate, drought 1632. You hesitate. The screen blurs. Dreams leak back, monks trading bishops for monsoon forecasts. A pawn shop where time's sold by the gram. That rook-shaped stain on your childhood bedsheet. The king's final collapse sounds like a snapped banjo string. Dusk brings another mold, grocery store wax, and stolen office pens as tools. Your first pawn resembles a bunion, the second, a demented prawn. The nun's voice hisses in your fan's whir. Beginners always overneed, like grief. Sleep comes harder tonight. You count ceramic bishops instead of sheep. One wears a tiny cowboy hat. Another quotes discards in Swahili. The last holds a flag reading vacancy as he marches off the shelf. Somewhere beyond jet lag, the real game continues. Monks moving mountains while you push condiments. Wax softens. Clocks lie. The king is both fallen and triumphant. You drift, knowing the board never empties, only resets. The bourbon's warmth dissolves, leaving your limbs heavy as starlight. Neon blurs into wood-grain shadows, rafters arching like ribs of some great sleeping beast. Dream wax pools between your fingers, earthy sweet, humming with forgotten hymns. Monks fade their comet-carved board, now just water stains on your ceiling. The firefly kings dim, one last flicker, mirroring your microwave clock. Resin thickens in your throat, a fossilized prayer. Your apartment breathes, walls expanding with each tired blink. The pepperoni king leans, his waxen face half melted into prophecy. Dawn glazes his crooked crown golden light, catching what might be Gia's glyphs or pizza grease. Rain whispers against glass, same tempo as monkish fingertips tapping comet stone. You press a palm to the window. Hexagons shimmer beneath skin, echoes of hive walls older than Latin. The bishop's ghost swirls down the drain, its tiny farewell lost in gurgling pipes. You almost salute. Leftovers mutate in fridge light, soy sauce pawns charging pickled onion ramparts. Hunger feels distant, theoretical, gauzy as monastery incense. Text notifications hum digitized moth wings against your wrist. You let them blur. The fan's work carries half words now, over need, grief, resets. Ceramic bishops line your eyelids, their chessboard a flicker behind closed lashes. One yawns. Another adjusts its miniature cowboy hat. The vacancy flag droops, windless and eternal. Wax softens. Time stretches taffy sweet and irrelevant. Somewhere, mountains shift position by millimeter moonlight. A scarab-wing knight trembles, arrested mid-leap. You exhale. The board remains, its edges bleeding into tomorrow's unplayed games. Kings fall upward. Pawns sprout wings. Salt air drifts through cracked windows. Or is it Lalibella's highland winds? Either way, it smells like forgiveness. Like fresh beeswax, crushed lappies, possibility. Sleep arrives as a quiet opponent, moving no pieces, claiming no territory. The final whisper rustles through half-formed pawns. The game breathes, even when you don't. Darkness tastes of honeycomb. You don't resist. The board waits, patient as stone, for morning's first move.